Hello everybody, welcome back to another manga discussion video. This one on Jun Mochizuki's volume number 13 of Pandora Hearts. If you're new to this series, this video is nothing but spoilers for this volume as well as all the volumes that came before. Also, just so you know, I don't read ahead before I make these videos, so I've only read up to this volume, so anything that I'm guessing at or theorizing at, it's just that, totally guesses. So let's get right into it because this volume was crazy. There was murder, mayhem, fire, creepy kids, like all the stuff that makes a manga amazing. So the volume opens with a flashback of Elliot going to Fianna's house for the first time, and his brothers have this hushed conversation that makes it very clear that there's quite a few things going on because they say to each other, like, you know, don't worry, I won't tell him the true purpose of this place and everything else. And we see Elliot and Leo meeting for the very first time. Then we cut to our present in the manga, and Leo and Elliot are fighting. Elliot in the last volume saw Leo having a conversation with this Isla Yura, who Elliot is very suspicious of because Isla Yura seems to be sort of like a snake charmer who's trying to manipulate Elliot's mother. And so he is just kind of in this situation where he's arguing with Leo and he's like, tell me what's going on. And Leo says, basically, you know, mind your own damn business. You're so infuriating. He actually throws stuff at Elliot and then he storms off. And Elliot goes his own way as well. And sort of like Brake and Oz and Gilbert, they've all been witness to this and they're kind of like a bit mystified. They don't know what to make of it. And Brake says, Oz, you should go after Leo. You'll probably have a better chance of talking some sense into him. And he says to Gilbert, you know, Elliot's your brother. You should go after him. And you guys don't worry. I'll keep an eye on Isla Yura. And so they all sort of, we have our group splitting up once again. Gilbert arrives with Elliot and they begin sort of talking about Leo, and Gil is sort of like, your valet is something that he can really sort of speak his mind like that. He seems so quiet, and Elliot says, no, you've got it all wrong. He actually can be quite violent and snaps, which is funny because it's quite different from the view that we've had of Leo so far. And when Oz runs into Leo, they start discussing Elliot and how Leo sort of views Elliot in a positive manner. And we get this flashback of the two of them, how their relationship sort of developed from that initial meeting at Fianna's house. And basically what it really boils down to is that Elliot needed a valet and he didn't want to go with the butt kissers and the two-faced jerks and everything else that were in aristocratic society. Instead, he meets this boy who he finds that he's comfortable with and that he can talk to, and that the boy doesn't hold anything back. He just tells it like he sees it. He acts the way he's going to act. He's not impressed or awed just because Elliot has a title. And it's these things that makes Elliot ask Leo if he'll be his valet. And it tells you a lot about these characters, right? So it tells you a lot about Elliot and about the type of thing that he values, how he values that loyalty and how he values honesty. And even if he finds it uncomfortable, the kind of honesty that he gets, he still appreciates it far more than somebody being false. And for Leo, we find out that we have this sort of moody individual who's very withdrawn. In fact, Elliot says that the other kids at Fianna's house seem to be sort of afraid of him, and yet he's also gifted. He plays piano beautifully, he's very intelligent, he reads books, and so we have these two characters that seem to be a bit opposite, but yet we find they have so much in common. They're fiery personalities. Leo even says, you know, it actually felt good to explode because I've had to hold it all in because I've had to try and rein in Elliot's temper. And the other thing that's kind of interesting that comes up between these two is the whole thing about Leo not cutting his hair, hiding his eyes. And Elliot makes a statement, and it's too bad because he has the most beautiful colored eyes. Now, I found it interesting that they don't say what color those eyes are, which I think is a particular choice in manga, because of course manga being black and white, unless somebody specifically states a color, you don't necessarily know what the color someone's eyes are unless it's explicitly stated or they're in the color drawings in the beginning of the book, which even though Leo has, he's got those big glasses, and so we've never actually seen his eyes. And now he makes the statement to Elliot that he's not hiding his face from the world, it's just that he has no interest in seeing the world, that in a sense he needs to see, he wants to view the world in a minimal way. He wants a barrier between his own eyes and the world, which I found very interesting, and I'm not too sure what exactly that's going to mean for Leo going forward and what that means for his character. But it certainly hints at something, that someone has seen something awful and that someone has seen something fairly terrible. And we get that because initially Elliot's family is completely against him having this commoner as his valet, and even his own father has an issue with it, until a bunch of kids go missing from Fiona's house, and Leo and Elliot go down into the pit of Sablier to try and find these kids, and something happens. Elliot blacks out, and Leo essentially saves him. And immediately after this, Elliot says it's strange that all of a sudden his father completely accepted Leo. So we're not too sure what happened. We're not sure what Leo saw, what Leo did, even really who Leo is. I mean, his age is considerably older than all the other kids at Fiona's house. And we know that the kids in Fiona's house have been dying. So it's uncertain to me exactly who Leo is, how he ended up at this orphanage, seeing as how he seems to be old enough that he could conceivably take care of himself. And we have these two characters basically summing up their individual conversations with Gilbert and Oz, expressing quite a bit of appreciation and admiration for each other. In fact, Leo goes that one step further and basically says, I will kill anyone who is going to cause harm or a problem for Elliot. And that even means myself. And he basically says to Oz, if I turn out to be the root of Elliot's sadness, you have to promise that you're going to kill me. And I found this very interesting because this sounds so similar to what Gil was saying about Oz. And we know that this is because of the influence of a spell that was placed on Gil by the old Duke Barma. So I kind of wondered if there's some magical influence on Leo because, as I said, it's such a similar state of mind to what Gil had. Or, you know, it could be just pure devotion, but it seems odd to me that you'd have such a clear parallel between these two and not have some specific purpose for it. And this chapter ends with Oz and Leo then discovering a decapitated body. Now, immediately the thought is that this has been done by the headhunter. I mean, it's been building up to this, right? But when we kind of open up into the next chapter, we have Isla Yura being grabbed by one of his people, and we have Sharon sort of communicating with Oz because her chain is in Oz's shadow. And it seems that each of them have found, like, Isla Yura's people have found a headless body, Oz has found a headless body, but we find out that they seem to be under different circumstances. When Isla Yura finds the decapitated body, it's someone from Pandora, and it appears that their head has been chewed off by an animal, not the clean cut of the headhunter. And it's one of the people that Raim was with, and then we switch to Raim, who's sort of coming out, you know, regaining consciousness, and he finds out that he's been taken hostage by the Baskerville Lily, this, you know, kind of deranged yet sweet little girl. And she has a chain that is a black dog that she's called Bandersnatch, and it apparently has a thing for biting people's heads off, literally. And she says to Raim that she noticed that he was a contractor and that Bandersnatch hasn't had anyone to play with in a long time. And she kind of pesters him, you know, bring out your chain, bring him out. And because I don't think we need to fight right away. We don't need to be, you know, I don't need to kill you right away. And Raim sort of makes the statement that his chain is useless or a dimwit. And Lily thinks initially that he's sort of downplaying himself. And we get this backstory of Lily, that she came from this very poor, large family. She was blamed a lot for the problems in the family. And then she says, after some events or tragedies that I was blamed for, that she's branded on her face and is thrown out of the village and thrown out to the wild to die, and that these lights sort of appear before her, and when she invites them in, she is called to the Baskerville home and becomes a Baskerville. So this becomes pretty critical information. We're actually learning that the Baskervilles themselves are not a family. They're not bound by blood. They're actually bound by the abyss. At least that's what we assume, because that's what Lottie sort of says. She says that, you know, we're people that are, the abyss considers us close to it, and so it chooses us to become Baskervilles. And this to me would sort of explain why the Baskervilles don't question Glenn, because as Glenn being the head of the Baskervilles, I mean, these people are basically tied to Glenn by a bond that in some ways exceeds family. These are people that are all, from what we gather, outcasts. They're all people that have been mistreated. I even kind of suspect, and you know, based on what happens later on in this volume, I kind of suspect that maybe even they are like on the verge of death when this light sort of comes to them, or they've just freshly, newly died. I'm not too sure how that plays out, but definitely, I mean, Lily says she thought she was going to die. She felt like she was on the verge of death before this light appeared from her. So I kind of wonder if that's sort of part of the whole thing of the Baskervilles, is that it's almost like you're getting a new life, a new lease on life. And Raym, of course, realizes like this is fairly phenomenal information. He's finding out more about the Baskervilles from this chatty young girl than pretty much anything that's on record about the Baskervilles. And so he realizes that this is very important information he has to deliver. And at the same time, he's also realizing that this is sort of this innocent young girl that, despite the Baskervilles being these, you know, crimson shinigami and, you know, these terrible things that everybody seems to be afraid of, this girl's just sitting here laughing and everything else like any other girl. And he asks her, so I guess you're here because of the seals. And she says, yep, I'm here, and Lottie's here, and you know, we're, and these other, you know, the others are here, and we're gonna be releasing the seals, because she's like, I feel bad for Glenn having his soul trapped. And Raym is like, so if Glenn comes back and he tells you that, you know, to do the tragedy of Sablier all over again, will you? And she's like, well, I don't know, but I mean, if Glenn asks us to. And then Raym, stone cold, boom, caps the girl, like right in the head. Like, wow. I was that, you know, I talk again and again in this manga about things that just totally take a turn, and you're like, and you just sit there wondering, what just happened there? Because the whole dialogue and the thoughts that Raym is having, they're all building up to you assuming that this is going to be a bridge, that there's going to be a bridge of peace between Pandora and the Baskervilles, and all of a sudden he does it right there, like it's nothing. And he basically is like, yep, she seemed like an innocent kid, but she gonna kill people, so I just did some public service. But now we find out where the Baskervilles are truly different. She's not dead. She comes back, and there's like the dialogue is written in this crazed sort of font. She's like, I told you we were special. And so this is why I was saying earlier, I wonder if the Baskervilles, when you become a Baskerville, if you are on the verge of death, I mean, we know that Glenn is immortal because his soul can transfer into another person. But no one's actually talked about physical immortality. I mean, heck, we all know from zombie movies that if you get capped in the head, you're dead, even as a zombie, but yet Lily seems to shake it off like it's nothing. And so what are the Baskervilles? Like, are they ghosts? Like, I mean, clearly they're not ghosts per se, but I kind of wonder, I mean, and we've seen, well, and Echo, well, when she was Zwei, the kind of damage that he took from Break and supposedly still lived. Obviously, the Baskervilles are capable of either incredible feats of healing, or they are in some ways immortal. But that begs the question, why is it then that Glenn has to transfer his soul into another body if the Baskervilles are immortal? Maybe that's just because of Glenn's special status. I don't know. I'm sure we're going to find out. But it clearly indicates that the Baskervilles themselves are far more than just human beings, even in terms of being just human beings that have, abilities because of how close they are to the abyss. It's even beyond that. Then we switch over to Isla Yura and his man, and they find they're checking out these agents that have been killed, clearly by what they say they believe is a beast. And they're confronted by Lottie and her chain, and the one guy's taken out. Isla Yura goes to attack her and gets his butt kicked without even a sweat. And it's Break that ends up saving Isla Yura's life and says to Lottie, we met before and maybe we should continue that conversation. She's like, I wondered what you meant by the whole idea that we could be friends. And Break says, because my desires and your motives are in line with each other. And I thought that we could work with each other. Now, I think, of course, that has to do with whatever the intention of the Abyss made Break promise before she released him. We still don't know what exactly the nature of that is, but definitely if Break's got something that's in common with the motives and the desires of the Baskervilles, I have to think that it has to do at least at some level with the intention of the Abyss. But his caveat to that is, unless, of course, my friend Raim has been harmed, and then that friendship, that soft sell is off the table. Which, it's, to me, that's the one redeeming thing with Break, right? Because you do kind of get I've always had the suspicion that he's a bit underhanded and two-faced and kind of playing multiple sides of this, but definitely the man is still true to his friends. He is, that he is true to Sharon, and here he is proving that he is true to Raim. And so, again, it gives him these redeeming qualities, even when he really does come across often as a two-faced bastard. Now we switch back to Oz and Leo. And Oz is saying to Leo, like, I guess they found the corpse because a maid screamed. And he says to Leo, get this lady out of here. Just go, take her. And so we have them separated. Oz is sort of looking at this body. And then he spots something down at the end of the hallway. And as he approaches it, it's tackled by Alice. And from his shadow, Sharon says, Oz, you shouldn't be going by yourself. I've sent Alice for now to help you. And it turns out that who she's tackled is Philippe. And he is dressed in a crimson robe. And he says, we're doing a play. And the characters that we're playing are called the Baskervilles. And Alice says to him, what's the name of the play? And he says, The Tragedy of Sablier. I'm playing the Shinigami that's supposed to be a guide. Playing the Baskerville that's supposed to be a guide for Oz and take him to his final destination. And then we go to the Great Hall, and all of the kids are dressed in these robes, and we soon find that there's also adults. I'm guessing these were the adults that we saw sort of worshiping around the seal. And when they're confronted by one of the footmen, his head comes clean off. And now, it doesn't show it in the manga how that happened. So we don't know if it was a chain. We don't know if somebody else did it. I don't know. They're just, people when they're screaming, they're just like, his head came clean off. So it's almost like an invisible force perhaps did it. But it's most definitely tied to these kids. In the midst of all of this chaos, Elliot, of course, has been searching for Leo. Gilbert and he have split up because Gilbert's gone to see, and, they've heard this commotion. Gilbert's gone to see and make sure that Ada is safe and, to check on Sharon. Elliot is found by his sister, Vanessa, who basically is like, why the hell are we here? Why'd you even come here? I told you it was a bad idea. And Elliot, he essentially tells her, like, I came here because I want to find the headhunter. I want to take this thing out. And his sister is sort of like, oh, for the honor of Night Ray? Yeah, if that's what you want to believe, like, whatever, just stop giving me a hard time. He actually slaps her across the face when she starts bad-mouthing Leo. Again, another kind of cool thing showing how strong their bond is. And as they're running out, he sees the fire, he sees the blood and the death, and he has like the flashback again from his dream, and he appears to lose consciousness. And when he comes back to, his sister is standing there, except she got no head, and down her body goes, and Elliot, of course, is like freaking out. And then Break comes in and he grabs Elliot, and he's like, basically accuses Elliot of being the headhunter. Now, an interesting series of panels just before Vanessa dies is we see the top of what clearly I would say is Leo's head. And there's a text bubble that just says Elliot. And as Elliot's kind of losing consciousness, he says Leo. And then the next text bubble is say its name. And this is all just before we find out that Vanessa dies. So anyway, Break grabs Elliot and says, you know, you're the headhunter because you're the only one whose energies I sense here. And as long as I hold you and I keep, you know, use my chain to suppress your ability, then it'll prevent anything else from going on. Because we find out as we go into the next chapter of this volume that Fianna's house is really, really dark. Like, so I need to talk this out a little bit. So basically, they feed the blood of this singular chain to all the kids, make the kids say the chain's name, and they call it Humpty Dumpty. And now I kind of initially was like, Humpty Dumpty, but the whole idea is that the chain can have multiple contractors, and through each of the contractors, it can make copies of itself. So in essence, each of the kids kind of has Humpty Dumpty as a chain, but the main chain that occupies sort of the figurehead, it still kind of controls, is attached to all these sort of copies. And because it's got multiple contractors, it means that the InQs moves at a far slower pace on all of them. Now, this is where this gets a little odd to me. Now, we find out that, I guess, Fianna's house, they've been doing this. And so immediately my question was, but Fianna's house is run by the Night Rays. So why would the headhunter or Humpty Dumpty or whatever this chain we want to call it, why would it target Night Rays? But then I started thinking about it. Isla Yura is sort of manipulating the Night Rays' mom. He's gotten very close to her. And how did he get close to her? Because her sons were killed by the headhunter. And to me, I'm kind of wondering now if that was the initial sort of thing with the headhunter, was that it would initially kill, you know, he used it to initially kill the Night Ray boys so that it would give him an opening to kind of get into the Night Ray family. The only thing that I can't quite figure out is how he himself became involved with the house if it was owned by the Night Rays to begin with. I mean, the only thing that I kind of wonder is if he's got the seal, then it would mean that like his family had been trusted with a seal by the Barmas, which kind of makes sense seeing as how they have those ties through their own nation. And even Duke Barma kind of refers to Isla Yura as of my blood, right? So to me, somehow he's tied into this, and somehow he's gained control of the house. And each of these kids now, we know, can summon a headhunter. So this would explain why we could have a headhunter appear somewhere else, even though, you know, our main suspects, at this point, I'm thinking it's got to be Leo. I'm thinking Leo is the head of this whole thing. And I mean, only because he's the only one that really stands apart from all of these kids, right? And we know that he's from the house, and we know that he refers to them as his brothers and sisters. And I kind of wonder if the kids, they've used the kids to summon the headhunter in the past, and if that's why the kids die. Because remember when Leo sort of gets that note, he's like, you know, another one's died. How many does he say that's been? Like 6? Like, I'm wondering numbers-wise if it would make sense the number of times the headhunter has attacked compared to the number of kids who have died, if those two would sort of mesh. So I kind of wonder if, even though the head of the whole thing doesn't die because his InQs move slower, does you summoning the headhunter, like a copy of it, does it basically like burn out the kid and kill the kid, or get them dragged into the abyss? So Brake is holding Elliot, and Gilbert comes and he says to Gilbert, you know, check for an InQs. We need to know for sure. Everything will be safe. I believe he's the nucleus of this whole thing. I'm holding him. Check it now. And Gilbert gets pissed and he's like, Brake, why are you doing this? You know, this is ridiculous. Elliot would never allow himself to become an illegal contractor. And they begin to fight and everything else. And Elliot's like, I'll check for myself, so you guys don't need to fight. And then all of a sudden, a guy appears up in a balcony. And he's like, help me, he's cutting heads off. And whack, off comes his head. So Gil looks at, Brake, and he's like, okay, well, clearly he ain't it if somebody's still chopping heads. So they take off. And Elliot does check himself, and he realizes, of course, he has no InQs. So he sort of breathes that sigh of relief. Okay, I'm not an illegal contractor, but it does mean that somebody else is the head of the headhunter. And I've said again, I do believe at this point that it's Leo. I don't know exactly how that works in the timing wise. And I don't even know really how this whole thing sort of ties together in terms of Isla Yura's, what he's benefiting from this, because we know that he seems to have this obsession with Jack Vesalius, and I can almost think that him trying to imitate the tragedy of Sablier at this party is his way of somehow trying to summon Jack, to try and bring Jack out, because it's similar to what Jack had to endure before. And again, I'm kind of wondering if the headhunter was used as a means of opening the door for Isla Yura's influence over the Night Ray family. I don't know what his motivation for that would be. I don't know why he would want to do that, but I can't help but feel that that sort of makes sense, that it opened the door for him. And then when we have, everything's silent for a while because he's got the influence, and it is until they start to find the other seals that all of a sudden the headhunter comes back. And if his whole idea is to release Jack, then maybe he feels that's why he needs to destroy the seals. Maybe he doesn't quite realize that the seals really are only for Glenn, and that they're really not going to do anything in terms of to Oz, or at least we don't think so. And then we end the volume with two things of jeopardy. We end it with one, with Oz and Alice they've obviously followed Philippe, and he has led them to the seal, and Alice looks like she's in pain, obviously, because the seal negates the abilities of chains. Oz, of course, is looking a little weary / pissed / worried, maybe. And even Sharon, we have that thing where she's found by Gilbert and stuff, and she says Equus was forced out from Oz's shadow, so he must be wherever the seal is. And then we end the volume with Brake finding Raim and Lily, and he snaps because Raim is dead. And Brake makes it pretty clear he's about to clean up the people that caused it to begin with. So another huge volume, and again, I know I'm not hitting everything that happened. There's so much that goes on in these books, it becomes increasingly difficult. Like, I actually take these gaps to sort of look through my copy again and say, did I cover, like, what was I going to say next? Because even just trying to keep it all up here to talk to you guys about gets difficult because so much is going on. The anticipation's killing me, so I'm going to finish up this video and get right to reading volume number 14. Thank you so much for hanging in there on another long video. Again, anything that I've missed and you want to talk about, put it in the comments. That's fantastic, and we can do it there. I will see you next week for another video. Thanks so much for watching. Until then, bye-bye for now.